guys, a very warm welcome to Motorhoming Adventures.
Motorhoming Adventures.
Absolutely, this is our new channel, and the old one being...
It was offshore and onshore adventures, but here we're going to bring you all things motorhoming, the UK, Europe, further afield, who knows.
Absolutely, and we'll also be bringing across some of our original films that are on our old channel, or motorhoming films of course, and we'll be bringing them onto this channel so you don't miss out.
Absolutely, yeah. So stay tuned. All things motorhoming, technical, trips, travels, you name it. It's great to have you along.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you enjoy the channel, please do subscribe.
Oh, of course. Please do subscribe. And of course, the odd like is good too.
Thank you. In this episode, we're going to be exploring, well, the one Truma error code that's happened to us.
Indeed.
Yeah.
E603H. And those of you who have experienced that error code will have probably been pulling your hair out a little bit as we were. So this looks briefly at our trip to Truma, the Truma factory, because we're still under warranty with the Combi 6E boiler that we have. It also covers a little bit about the boiler itself and the inner workings of it, and also that great question as to where's all my water gone when you wake up in the morning, it's a bit chilly, and you realise that probably the frost protection system has kicked in. So just to look at the ways to deal with it and to reset the relevant waterways. Okay, join us for that short film.
Indeed.
So, just out of interest, for those of you who have ever wondered what's in the innards of your Combi 6, Truma Combi 6 boiler, we've actually popped up to Derby to have our heating system looked at because we were getting an error code, an E603H. So much so that it has actually locked us out of using the heater at all. But here in a very nice waiting area up at the Truma factory, they've got one of these cut away which actually shows some of the innards and the workings, and here is where you have your gas burner at the back there, and this area here, which of course continues, this is merely cut away. Surrounding the gas burner is this heat exchanger. And down at the bottom here, these two pipes here, those are your electric elements in effect. Surrounding the heat exchanger in this void here is your 10 litres of water, which is obviously heated by the gas. And when, for example, you choose on your Truma boiler a mix 1 or a mix 2, you're then using your gas burner, which is the most efficient way of heating the water, but then you're adding to it the elements here. Mix 1 obviously brings on half, mix 2 uses all of the power, but only up to a maximum of 2 kilowatts, whereas of course the overall power of the heater, if it's running on gas, is 6 kilowatts. So the most efficient way, of course, therefore to run it would be to use in terms of speed, would be to use the gas to heat it up, because that brings it up to temperature in the quickest. The back here, that's where it drags the air in initially to then take in through the vent here. This is where the air then passes through as it's warmed up then by the gas air, by the warm air, or the gas that heats the air there, and it comes into this side of the heater here, where it's blown out then through your vents and round your caravan or van. Down here, this little sensor down here, this is the one that was causing us the problems and causing us to get the E603H, which is overheating code. That was the culprit for the 603Hs. They've now hooked it up to a laptop, and that has enabled them to cancel out the codes, to reset the circuit board, because after so many fault codes, if the circuit board just says, I'm not doing it anymore, you need to take it to an engineer in effect. So that's why we're here. They've reset the circuit board and have got us running again. but their advice overall was to run the heating and water, if you're on hookup of course, at mix 2, and then allow the printed circuit boards to do all the working out of how much gas and or electric they'll use. But by far mix 2, once you're on site, was their suggestion, their engineer's suggestion, as to the most efficient way to run the system. Obviously if you're off grid and without electric, then you've got the full power then of the gas itself, which is more than sufficient to run through the middle here into the heat exchanger, which then allows the water then to warm up, as I've said. So yeah, an interesting little look at the heater itself. This bit here is your gas intake down the bottom there. This is your water outlet when you switch your hot tap on, and then it refills itself down at the bottom there as water comes out the top then, so it's dragged in at the bottom. So that's a look at the cutaway. That's the Combi 6, this one, same as we've got in our Mobilvetta Motorhome, and that's a little look at the interior of it, if you were ever wondering how it does what it does. What seems to have been the cause of our 603H problem was that we had perhaps had the water on during the day when it was still relatively warm outside, because this started back in September time for us. So the water was heated up in its 10 litre container here that goes all round the heat exchanger, and then in the evening when the temperature dropped a bit and we decided to switch the heating on, what the engineer has said may have been causing it is that then suddenly all the heat that's built up in the water here is then, as soon as you put the heating on, is then blown over that sensor down there, and that suddenly then goes from a relatively low temperature to a really high temperature because there's a lot of heat in the water, and that's when probably the sensor was saying to itself basically that increase in temperature was way too much, and it then put up the fault code as a safety device in effect. Of course that's not an absolute definitive explanation, but it's from somebody who clearly, the chap that's been dealing with our heater has many years experience looking after these. That's his best guess as to what's gone on there potentially. And then because we had the error code a number of times at that point, the printed circuit board locked it out and said you're not going to use it again until it's been thoroughly checked. So that's the best guess as to what's gone on with and why we've had to drop in here to Derby to just try and get it cleared and sorted out, which seems to be going pretty well. Okay, so hidden away under here is that Truma Combi 6E that does the water, the heating, and as we were mentioning earlier, or you've seen the sort of internal workings of the thing, but this is how they squash it into the van here. As I said, it may be, or one of the indications of that error code where there was an overheat. So I did wonder that when these are fully shut, whether that perhaps did restrict the airflow slightly, albeit there's still a lot of air that can travel through all these voids here, and indeed through this little void here and up underneath. There's actually a vent in the floor of the van, so there's a lot of air in, so I think it unlikely. I think it more that it was the temperature sensor fault, actually was an electrical fault rather than that, but as we have the ability to leave these open because we've nothing that needs to go up against this area, then I thought I'd do that as well to just add to the airflow. So let's try and show you if I know a question that's come up a lot is about when you lose your water, when it drops below 4 degrees, and what to look out for, or how you know. Well, this valve here is obviously in the position that it needs to be in for your heating and your water to work. So if the temperature drops below 4 degrees, then what happens, if you look down the bottom here, you'll see that if I induce what happens, because in effect it opens the valve to let the water out, it actually, when this turns 90 degrees, it pops out this button, and that's what happens when the temperature gets too low. You lose your water, and then you go to switch on the water in the morning, or worst case is you've had the water pump on during the night, the valve is activated, and it actually then drains all your water out, because it carries on pumping water into the Truma, but it's rapidly disappearing out that pipe under the van. So further towards the back, I'll show you where the when the heating cuts out, or should I say when the heating drops below temperature. Here we go. That's where it drops all the water out. If it drops below, I think it's 4 degrees, but if any of you know differently, stick it in the comments below. Something like 4 degrees, and that's when this Truma Combi 6E drops all its water out through there. So let's just induce it. Watch out for that little button there. There, you see, and now you can hear straight away that noise. You've got the water pump cutting back in to refill us, and I'll just turn that now and reset the button. So listen, and there you go. So now the water pump, so what happened there, you heard the water starting to drop out onto the grass below us. The button popped out, but as soon as I then turn this back across 90 degrees, reset the button at the bottom here, that then allowed the water pump to refill the hot water tank, 10 litres, as you know, or as you remember from that earlier extract when we were in the factory, which doesn't take long obviously. 10 litres of fresh, but obviously this has to be a crossways like that, in that position, button has to be in, and then you can safely switch your pump back on and it will refill your tank. What also is a good idea as well is, if it has popped due to frost and it's still obviously very early in the morning perhaps and still very cold, then you can actually not reset your water, but you can just have heating only, which will work even with the valves open. Set the heating on, leave it on for 20 minutes or so, half an hour, whatever, and that will then heat the van, and indeed of course the tank and everything that's in the boiler under here, and that will then avoid the risk then of it immediately re-tripping once you've reset it, which can of course happen if the temperature is still very cold. So try and get some warmth in the whole unit, and then this will reset without immediately popping back out, which it will do if it's still too cold in your wherever your heater is sited, be it a caravan or a motorhome or similar. Okay, so that's the magic valve, which causes many a consternation as to where has my water gone and why doesn't it work. They've made it particularly difficult to get at in this, but in this van I take this panel off. It's only fortunately got about 4 screws in it, which allows you to lift this up. That then gives you access to this piece, and if you remember from that earlier clip when we were inside the factory there, once you take that off, that gives you access to that small reset button, which is also one of the methods we tried, was to do a hard reset on the system, but the bottom line was it had been done so many times that the system then at one point says, right, you've reset this too many times, must be something bigger fault, and so it even locks you out of that reset as well. So that's what therefore took us to the factory, and the rest you've seen and heard about. Good old Truma error codes. So that was an insight into the whys and wherefores of our Truma heating code error code, which was quite an episode, and eventually took us, albeit on a very nice overnight stay or two in Derbyshire, took us to the Truma factory, who I have to say were really great to deal with. Really informative, good to chat to the people in there, and very keen, you know, to share their experience and how best to look after the heaters, and particularly of course, as you saw, to tell us all about the workings, which was quite interesting now that we know exactly what's going on in there. So yes, if you get to that oh dear, where's the water gone, or why there's a big patch of water underneath your van early in the morning, it could be that, it could have tripped, it could be below 4 degrees. Make sure everything's reset properly before you, and or preheat your van before you then try and re-engage the water and the water pump. Otherwise it might carry on dropping water out from under your van.
So we hope you find that film useful. We found that the engineers at Truma were actually really helpful, weren't they?
Yeah, very helpful indeed. Sorted us out, took the time to explain just about everything they were doing, and also to give us that interesting insight into the boiler itself. So fantastic to deal with. So hopefully, yeah, you've got a bit more of knowledge on the Truma system. But if you've got any questions at all, drop them in the comments below. And also, of course, if you've had any e-code experiences yourself, then also add your story perhaps also in the comments below. We'd love viewers, subscribers, of course. It is completely free. And until the next time, thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See you soon.
Bye now.
Bye.